Jasmine Williams's cheek stung as the flight attendant's palm left a red mark. "Animals like you belong in the bathroom," she hissed. Tears welled as Jasmine clutched her hungry infant. Her phone buzzed, her husband Travis texting, "Surprise. Just finalized the purchase. I own SkyWest now." Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button if you believe public breastfeeding should be respected, and subscribe to follow more stories about justice prevailing against discrimination. Ready to see how this flight attendant's career crashed after messing with the wrong family? Let's continue. Jasmine Williams had been looking forward to this trip for weeks. As a successful black pediatrician at Atlanta Memorial Hospital, she rarely had time for family vacations. This journey to Los Angeles was special, her first flight with 3-month-old Zora to visit her parents, who hadn't yet met their granddaughter in person. Her husband Travis planned to join them 2 days later after finalizing what he described as the biggest deal of his career. SkyWest Airlines Flight 237 was scheduled for a prompt 9 a.m. departure. Jasmine arrived early, expertly navigating the terminal with Zora strapped to her chest in a baby carrier, diaper bag over one shoulder, and a small carry-on rolling behind her. Several passengers smiled at the sleeping infant as Jasmine boarded and settled into her window seat in row 14. "She's beautiful," whispered the elderly woman beside her. "How old?" "Just turned 3 months last week," Jasmine replied proudly, adjusting Zora's tiny knit cap. The boarding process continued smoothly until the captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the inconvenience, but we're experiencing some mechanical issues that need addressing before takeoff. We expect to resolve this quickly, but will need to remain at the gate temporarily." That temporarily stretched into 30 minutes, then an hour. The cabin grew warmer as the air conditioning operated at minimal capacity. Passengers shifted restlessly in their seats. Zora woke, initially content to observe the new surroundings with wide, curious eyes. But as the delay entered its second hour, her patience evaporated. The first whimpers quickly escalated into desperate wails that echoed through the increasingly tense cabin. Jasmine tried everything, rocking, singing softly, offering a pacifier, but nothing soothed her hungry daughter. "I'm so sorry," Jasmine apologized to those nearby as she reached for her nursing cover in the diaper bag. With practiced movements, she draped the breathable fabric over her shoulder and chest, creating a private space to feed her daughter. Within moments of latching, Zora's cries subsided to contented feeding sounds. Jasmine exhaled with relief, grateful for the momentary peace. That tranquility shattered when Karen Blackwell, a senior flight attendant with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, marched down the aisle toward her. "Ma'am," Karen's voice carried deliberately, drawing attention from surrounding rows. "You need to stop that immediately or take it to the lavatory." Jasmine looked up, momentarily confused. "Excuse me? You can't do that here," Karen's lip curled slightly. "There are children and men present. It's inappropriate." Heat rushed to Jasmine's face as she realized every nearby passenger was now watching the exchange. "I'm just feeding my baby. I'm using a cover, and I have a legal right to breastfeed wherever I'm legally allowed to be." Karen's eyes narrowed. "This is my aircraft, and I decide what's appropriate. Either you go to the bathroom or you stop." "The bathroom? It's unsanitary. Would you eat your lunch in a public restroom?" Jasmine kept her voice level despite her rising indignation. "Federal law protects my right to feed my child." Karen leaned closer, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Listen, I don't care what you people think you're entitled to. This isn't about laws. It's about decency." The phrase, "you people," hung in the air between them. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. "My baby is hungry," Jasmine stated firmly. "I'm not doing anything wrong." What happened next occurred so quickly that Jasmine barely had time to react. Karen's right hand swung upward and connected with Jasmine's left cheek with a crack that silenced the entire cabin. The nursing cover slipped, and Zora began wailing again at the disruption. "Animals like you belong in the bathroom," Karen hissed, loud enough for nearby Rose to hear. The slap left Jasmine speechless, her cheek burning with pain and humiliation. Tears welled in her eyes as she struggled to maintain her composure while comforting her screaming infant. The shock in the cabin broke as multiple passengers simultaneously reached for their phones. Camera sounds clicked as the incident was captured from various angles. A young woman across the aisle stood up. "I recorded everything. That's assault." Through her tears, Jasmine noticed her phone buzzing with a text message. Balancing Zora in one arm, she checked the screen. "Surprise. Just finalized the purchase. I own SkyWest now. Call me when you land. Love you both." Jasmine stared at the message from Travis, the implications slowly dawning through her shock and pain. Her husband had just become Karen's boss, the owner of the entire airline. The question wasn't whether Karen would face consequences, but how severe they would be. Jasmine and Travis Williams had never had an easy path. They met 15 years earlier as sophomores at Howard University, she studying pre-med with dreams of becoming a pediatrician, he majoring in finance with an uncanny gift for market analysis. Their connection was immediate and profound, both of them recognizing in each other the same driven determination to succeed despite the obstacles society placed before them. Studying late at the library became coffee dates, which evolved into study partnerships that helped both maintain their positions at the top of their respective classes. By senior year, they were inseparable, supporting each other through the grueling final semesters and making plans for a future together. For Jasmine, medical school brought a series of painful reminders that excellence wasn't always enough. Despite graduating summa cum laude and scoring in the top percentile on her MCATs, professors sometimes confused her with the only other black female student in her cohort. Patients occasionally requested a different doctor upon seeing her enter the examination room. During her residency, nurses would double-check her orders while accepting identical instructions from white residents without question. "It's like swimming upstream," she told Travis during one particularly difficult week. "I have to work twice as hard for half the recognition." Travis understood. While his brilliance with numbers had opened doors at a prestigious investment firm, he quickly discovered that his ideas received more traction when presented by white colleagues. Rather than accepting this reality, he methodically documented his contributions, built an irrefutable track record of successful predictions, and eventually used his savings to launch his own investment firm. Williams' capital started small but grew rapidly as Travis demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to identify undervalued companies poised for explosive growth. His strategy of acquiring controlling interests in struggling but fundamentally sound businesses and installing diverse leadership teams consistently yielded remarkable turnarounds. Yet he maintained a deliberately low public profile, preferring to operate behind the scenes. When they married 8 years ago, both were already successful in their fields, but they shared a commitment to creating space for others who looked like them. Jasmine mentored minority pre-med students, while Travis quietly funded scholarships for promising young black entrepreneurs. The decision to start a family hadn't come easily. 4 years earlier, Jasmine had suffered a devastating miscarriage at 20 weeks. The experience at the hospital, where her pain was repeatedly downplayed, her concerns dismissed, and she was left alone for hours, left deep emotional scars beyond the loss itself. "I can't go through that again," she told Travis afterward. "Not in a system that doesn't value black women's pain or black babies' lives." It took years of healing before she felt ready to try again. When Zora arrived 3 months ago, healthy and perfect with Travis's dimples and Jasmine's eyes, they felt their family was finally complete. Now, sitting on the aircraft with her cheek still stinging from Karen's slap, Jasmine made a split-second decision. She wouldn't reveal Travis's ownership yet. This situation had unfolded because of who Karen was, not because of who Jasmine was married to. The resolution should come the same way. "Are you okay?" The elderly woman beside her placed a gentle hand on Jasmine's arm. That was completely unacceptable. Before Jasmine could respond, a man 2 rows ahead stood up. The flight attendant was just doing her job. Nobody wants to see that while they're traveling. See what exactly? Challenged a college-aged girl across the aisle who had been recording the incident. A mother feeding her child under a cover? Grow up. The cabin quickly divided, most passengers expressing outrage over Karen's behavior while a vocal minority defended her actions. Through it all, Karen stood in the aisle, radiating smug satisfaction as the conflict spread. The captain's voice cut through the growing chaos. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a passenger disturbance, we'll be returning to the gate. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Jasmine's heart sank. The passenger disturbance clearly referred to her, despite being the victim. Zora, sensing her mother's distress, began crying again. 15 minutes later, the aircraft door reopened, and 3 airport security officers boarded. Karen immediately approached them, gesturing emphatically toward Jasmine while speaking in hushed tones. The officers' expressions hardened as they listened to her version of events. The lead officer, a tall man with a shaved head and impassive expression, marched directly to Jasmine's row. "Ma'am, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us," he stated flatly. "What? Why?" Jasmine asked, genuinely confused. "I was assaulted by your flight attendant. Multiple passengers recorded it. According to the crew, you were disruptive and refused to comply with safety instructions," the officer replied mechanically. "We need you to deplane immediately." "That's not what happened," the college student interjected, holding up her phone. "I have the whole thing on video. The flight attendant hit her for breastfeeding." The officer barely glanced at the offered evidence. "Ma'am, this isn't up for debate. Either you exit the aircraft voluntarily, or we'll be forced to remove you." Several passengers protested simultaneously. "This is discrimination. She didn't do anything wrong. You can't just ignore evidence." But the security team had clearly made their decision before ever boarding the plane. As Jasmine struggled to gather her belongings while holding Zora, she noticed Karen watching from the front of the cabin, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The older white male passenger who had defended Karen earlier spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Some people just don't know how to behave in public. They think the rules don't apply to them." The racial undertone was unmistakable. Jasmine stood tall, holding Zora close as she prepared to walk the gauntlet of humiliation that awaited her. "I'm not leaving this aircraft," Jasmine stated firmly, securing Zora against her chest with one arm while gripping the seat with her other hand. "I've done nothing wrong. Your flight attendant assaulted me for legally feeding my child." The lead security officer's expression hardened. "Ma'am, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. We have the authority to remove any passenger deemed disruptive by the flight crew." "Then I want to speak to the captain," Jasmine insisted. "There are at least a dozen witnesses who saw what actually happened." Around her, supportive passengers nodded and voiced agreement. The college student who had been recording thrust her phone forward again. "Look at the video." The flight attendant slapped her. The security officer barely glanced at the screen. "Any complaints can be filed with the airline after deplaning. Right now, you need to come with us." As this confrontation unfolded, passengers throughout the cabin had their phones out. Some were recording the escalating situation, while others were already uploading earlier footage of Karen's slap to social media platforms. Within minutes, the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack was trending alongside clips of the incident. Karen stood at the front of the cabin, arms crossed with an expression of righteous indignation. Captain Phillips requested her removal for safety concerns, she announced loudly. "We can't take off until she complies." Other passengers began protesting now. "This is absolutely ridiculous. You're removing the victim. I'm canceling my SkyWest credit card after this." The second security officer, a younger man who seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the situation, leaned toward his colleague. "Maybe we should review the videos first. Not our call, the lead officer replied curtly. Then, turning back to Jasmine, last chance to walk out on your own. Jasmine looked around at the supportive faces, then down at Zora, who had finally fallen asleep after the traumatic feeding interruption. Making a scene would only further upset her daughter. Fine, she said quietly. But I want everyone to know that I'm complying under protest, and I'll be filing formal charges of assault and discrimination. As Jasmine gathered her diaper bag and carry-on, the elderly woman beside her squeezed her hand. We'll be witnesses for you, dear. This isn't right. Walking down the aisle with security officers flanking her felt like the longest journey of Jasmine's life. Every pair of eyes in the cabin followed her progress. Some passengers looked away in embarrassment or discomfort, while others filmed her humiliating exit. Karen's triumphant smirk as she passed the galley burned into Jasmine's memory. The jetway seemed to stretch endlessly before her. By the time they reached the terminal, Jasmine's legs were shaking with a combination of adrenaline and suppressed emotion. To her horror, the public humiliation was far from over. A small crowd had gathered near the gate, phones raised to capture her emergence. Somehow, word of the incident had spread through the terminal even before she deplaned. Being marched through the airport by security while holding her infant daughter felt like a perverse parody of a criminal walk of shame. What did she do? She heard someone whisper. Something with her baby on the plane, came the response. Halfway to the security office, Jasmine spotted 2 local news crews setting up cameras. The incident was spreading faster than she could process. Meanwhile, across the country in a San Francisco conference room, Travis Williams was accepting congratulations from his executive team on the successful acquisition of SkyWest Airlines when his chief of staff interrupted with a tablet in hand. "Sir, you need to see this," she said urgently. Travis took the device and felt his world tilt sideways. There on the screen was Jasmine, his wife, being escorted through Atlanta International Airport by security officers while clutching baby Zora. The headline read, "Black Mother Forcibly Removed from SkyWest Flight for Breastfeeding." "What the hell?" he whispered, quickly scanning the accompanying article and watching the clip of a flight attendant actually striking his wife. The article identified the airline as SkyWest, the company he had officially owned for less than 3 hours. Travis immediately tried calling Jasmine, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Next, he called SkyWest's operations center, identifying himself as the new owner, only to be placed on hold and transferred between departments by employees who clearly didn't believe his claim. Back in Atlanta, security officers ushered Jasmine into a small, windowless room in the airport's administrative section. A plastic chair and metal table comprised the only furniture. "Someone from airline management will be with you shortly to discuss the incident," the lead officer informed her before exiting and closing the door firmly behind him. Alone in the stark room with Zora, Jasmine finally allowed the tears she'd been holding back to fall. Her cheek still burned from Karen's slap, but the emotional pain of being publicly humiliated cut much deeper. She had done nothing wrong, had simply been feeding her hungry child, yet was being treated like a criminal. After 20 minutes, the door opened to reveal a middle-aged white man in a SkyWest management uniform. "Mrs. Williams? I'm Robert Keller, Customer Service Director. I understand there was an incident on Flight 237. "An incident?" Jasmine repeated incredulously. "Your flight attendant slapped me across the face for legally breastfeeding my baby. Then I was publicly humiliated and dragged off the plane like a criminal." "That's a bit more than an incident." Keller's expression remained neutral. "We take all passenger complaints seriously, but our staff has reported that you were being disruptive and refusing to comply with safety instructions." "That's a lie," Jasmine stated flatly. "Multiple passengers recorded what actually happened. It's probably all over social media by now." "Nevertheless, we need to take your official statement," Keller replied, placing a form on the table. "In the meantime, you've been placed on SkyWest's no-fly list pending investigation." "No-fly list? Are you serious right now?" Jasmine couldn't believe what she was hearing. I need to feed my baby and change her diaper. Is there a private room I can use? Keller checked his watch impatiently. We need to complete this paperwork first. The sooner you cooperate, the sooner you can attend to your personal matters. Outside the interrogation room, social media was exploding with outrage. The video of Karen slapping Jasmine had been viewed over 2 million times within an hour of being posted. News organizations were picking up the story, and calls for boycotting SkyWest were growing louder by the minute. Travis, having finally convinced someone at the airline's corporate office of his identity, had chartered a private jet and was now racing toward Atlanta, his heart pounding with a mixture of worry for his family and fury at the treatment they'd endured. As Jasmine sat in that sterile room, being treated like a perpetrator rather than a victim, she had no way of knowing that her husband was en route, or that the public humiliation she'd just experienced would soon become a turning point not just for her family, but for an entire corporation. Travis Williams gripped the armrest of his private jet seat as the aircraft began its descent into Atlanta International Airport. His normally composed demeanor had vanished the moment he saw the viral video of his wife being slapped and then forcibly removed from a SkyWest flight, the very airline he had acquired that morning. ETA 3 minutes, Mr. Williams, the pilot announced over the intercom. Travis nodded absently, his focus on the laptop before him where he was simultaneously monitoring the exploding social media firestorm, coordinating with his legal team via email, and attempting to establish his authority with SkyWest's executive leadership via text. The company's stock had already dropped 7% since news of the incident began spreading. Sir, his chief of staff said from the facing seat, the board members are assembled for the emergency call. They're waiting for you. Travis closed his laptop and picked up his phone. Put them on speaker. The voices of 12 confused and increasingly panicked board members filled the cabin. Most had been with SkyWest for years, comfortable in their positions of power at what had been a mid-tier airline with moderate but stable profits. Gentlemen, ladies, Travis began, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had made him a formidable force in the business world. For those who haven't been briefed, I'm Travis Williams, CEO of Williams Capital. As of 9:15 this morning, my firm acquired controlling interest in SkyWest Airlines. A chorus of surprised exclamations followed this announcement. This acquisition was scheduled to be announced next week after a smooth transition period, Travis continued. However, circumstances have changed. The woman who was assaulted by your senior flight attendant and then forcibly removed from Flight 237 in Atlanta is my wife, Dr. Jasmine Williams. Our 3-month-old daughter was with her. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Williams, a hesitant voice finally responded, we had no idea. This is an unfortunate coincidence. This is not about coincidence, Travis cut in sharply. This is about a culture that allowed a black woman to be physically assaulted for legally feeding her child, then punished her while protecting her attacker. Had this happened to anyone else's wife, it would be equally unacceptable. We're gathering all the facts, another board member began. The facts are on video being watched by millions as we speak, Travis interrupted again. Here's what's going to happen. First, the flight attendant involved will be terminated immediately. Second, the customer service director who placed my wife on a no-fly list will also be terminated. Third, I want every member of the leadership team and the captain of that flight in the executive conference room at the Atlanta hub within the hour. But some of those people are in different cities. Then get them on flights. Now. Travis's tone left no room for argument. I've drafted a public statement that will be released from corporate communications in 15 minutes. It acknowledges the incident, apologizes unreservedly to my wife, announces the termination of those responsible, and outlines immediate changes to company policy regarding breastfeeding mothers. The jet touched down as Travis continued issuing directives to the stunned board members. By the time he deplaned, the wheels of corporate accountability were already in motion. Meanwhile, Jasmine sat in the sterile interrogation room, still waiting for permission to change Zora's diaper. Robert Keller, the customer service director, had stepped out, briefly, 20 minutes earlier after receiving an urgent call. A gentle knock preceded the entrance of a young security officer, the same one who had seemed uncomfortable during her removal from the plane. "Dr. Williams," he said quietly. "I brought these from the family restroom." He placed a changing pad and a packaged diaper on the table. "And this?" A bottle of water followed. "I'm sorry about all this. The video's all over Twitter. People are pretty upset about how you were treated." "Thank you," Jasmine said sincerely, surprised by this small kindness amid the ordeal. "There's something else you should know," the officer added, glancing toward the door. "Your husband has been calling. Apparently, he's claiming to be the new owner of SkyWest." Everyone thought he was crazy until some big executive showed up 10 minutes ago looking terrified. Jasmine felt a surge of relief knowing Travis was involved, but before she could respond, the door swung open again. Robert Keller returned, his previously condescending demeanor replaced by ashen-faced panic. "Mrs. Dr. Williams," he corrected himself hastily. "There's been a misunderstanding. You're free to go, of course. If you'll follow me, we've prepared the executive lounge for your comfort while we sort this out." "I need to change my daughter first," Jasmine replied calmly, no longer asking permission. Of course," Keller stammered. "Take all the time you need. What do you think about how the airline staff treated Jasmine? Comment number 1 if you believe Karen should be fired immediately for her actions. Comment number 2 if you think the entire airline needs a complete overhaul of their policies. Hit that like button if you're glad Travis is coming to set things straight. Subscribe if you're wondering what will happen when Karen finally realizes who she actually slapped. But wait, will Travis's corporate power be enough to overcome the deeply ingrained discrimination Jasmine faced? What will happen when he finally confronts Karen face to face? Let's find out in the next part of this incredible story. Travis Williams strode through Atlanta International Airport like a gathering storm. 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal suit, he moved with purpose, his security detail struggling to keep pace. Airport staff scrambled out of his way, alerted by urgent calls from SkyWest executives that the airline's new owner was on site and furious. Despite his composed exterior, Travis's mind raced with images of Jasmine being humiliated, of baby Zora distressed. The thought of strangers putting their hands on his family made his blood boil. Throughout his career, Travis had cultivated a reputation for calm, strategic thinking, but this was different. This was personal. "Sir," his chief of staff hurried alongside him, "security has moved your wife to the executive lounge on the mezzanine level. The flight attendant and captain have been located and are being brought to the conference room as requested." Travis nodded sharply. "And the customer service director?" "Mr. Keller is with your wife, apparently trying to apologize." "Get him out of there," Travis ordered. "She doesn't need his apologies, he needs to be preparing his resignation." When Travis finally reached the executive lounge, he paused at the door, taking a deep breath to center himself. Jasmine needed her husband now, not the corporate executioner. He entered to find Jasmine sitting rigidly on a leather sofa, Zora sleeping against her chest. Despite her ordeal, she maintained the dignity that had always impressed him. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the chaos around them faded away. "Jazz," he said softly, crossing the room in 3 strides. "You're here," she whispered, her composure finally cracking as he enfolded both her and Zora in a gentle embrace. "I'm so sorry," he murmured against her hair. "I saw the video. Are you okay? Is Zora okay?" "We're fine," Jasmine assured him, though the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. "Just shaken. I never expected." She trailed off, unable to articulate the shock of being assaulted for something as natural as feeding her child. Travis pulled back slightly, his thumb gently brushing the cheek where Karen had struck her. Though no mark remained visible, the touch made Jasmine wince. "They're about to learn a very expensive lesson about consequences," Travis stated, his voice low but intense. "The board is in panic mode. The stock is plummeting. And the flight attendant who did this still has no idea what's coming. A knock at the door interrupted them. Travis's security chief entered, looking apologetic. "Mr. Williams, the parties you requested are assembled in the conference room." Travis turned to Jasmine. "I need to handle this. Will you be okay here?" Jasmine straightened her shoulders. "Actually, I want to be there. I deserve to see this through." Travis studied her face, noting the determination that had helped her overcome countless obstacles in her medical career. He nodded. "You're right. This is your moment too." With Travis's arm protectively around her waist and Zora securely in her carrier, Jasmine walked beside her husband to the conference room. Two security officers opened the double doors for them, revealing a tense tableau inside. Seated around a polished table were Captain James Phillips, looking uncomfortable in his full uniform, Robert Keller, the customer service director who had treated Jasmine so dismissively, and Karen Blackwell, the flight attendant whose slap had ignited the firestorm. Several SkyWest executives occupied other seats, their expressions varying from anxious to mortified. Karen sat with perfect posture, apparently still confident in her position. When she saw Jasmine enter with Travis, she smirked slightly, clearly assuming this was simply a higher-level complaint meeting where she would be protected by company policy. No one spoke as Travis guided Jasmine to the head of the table, where he pulled out a chair for her before taking his own seat. The room remained silent, the only sound coming from Zora's soft baby noises as she stirred in her carrier. "For those who haven't been properly briefed," Travis began, his voice carrying easily through the tense atmosphere, "I'm Travis Williams, CEO of Williams Capital and, as of this morning, the majority owner of SkyWest Airlines." Karen's smirk faltered. Captain Phillips straightened in his chair. Robert Keller, who had already realized the magnitude of his error, stared fixedly at the table. "The woman your senior flight attendant assaulted today," Travis continued, "is my wife, Dr. Jasmine Williams, a pediatrician at Atlanta Memorial Hospital. The baby your policies disrespected is our daughter, Zora." Karen's face drained of color as the implications dawned on her. Her mouth opened and closed without producing sound. "Before we address the individuals involved," Travis said, "I want to be clear about the facts." He pressed a button on a remote, and the large screen on the wall displayed the viral video of Karen slapping Jasmine. The footage played in excruciating detail, capturing Karen's disgusted expression, the forceful slap, and her venomous words, "Animals like you belong in the bathroom." When the clip ended, Travis turned to Karen directly. "Ms. Blackwell, would you like to explain your actions?" Karen shifted uncomfortably, her previous confidence evaporated. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. I was simply enforcing company policy regarding passenger compliance. Dr. Williams was being disruptive and—" "That's a lie," Jasmine interjected calmly. "I was legally feeding my hungry child under a nursing cover after being trapped on a hot plane for over 2 hours. You objected to my breastfeeding, demanded I use the bathroom, and when I refused, you assaulted me. The video speaks for itself," Travis added. "But let's review SkyWest's actual policy on breastfeeding." He nodded to his chief of staff, who distributed printed copies of the airline's own guidelines clearly stating that breastfeeding was permitted on all flights. Karen's strategy shifted instantly. "Mr. Williams, I had no idea who your wife was. Had I known she was connected to ownership—" "Stop," Travis cut her off, his voice sharp. "You think that's the problem? That you didn't recognize my wife as someone with connections? The issue isn't that you assaulted the wrong person. It's that you would assault anyone." Karen fell silent, finally grasping the severity of her situation. Captain Phillips cleared his throat. "Mr. Williams, as aircraft commander, I take full responsibility for what happens on my plane. However, I was in the cockpit dealing with the mechanical issue and was informed by Ms. Blackwell that we had an uncooperative passenger refusing safety instructions. And you didn't verify this information before authorizing security to remove my wife and infant daughter?" Travis questioned. The captain had no adequate response. Travis pressed another button on the remote. A new document appeared on screen, Karen Blackwell's personnel file. In reviewing Ms. Blackwell's record this afternoon, my team discovered 7 previous complaints of discriminatory behavior toward passengers of color. Each was dismissed after cursory investigation. 2 specifically involved black women with children. Karen's face flushed with anger. "You can't just access my private personnel file." "As owner of this airline, I can and did," Travis replied evenly. MS. "Blackwell, your employment with SkyWest is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings." Karen shot to her feet. "You can't do this. I've been with this airline for 15 years. The union will." "The union has already been consulted," one of the executives interjected. "Assault of a passenger is grounds for immediate termination under our contract." As security officers moved toward Karen, she pointed a trembling finger at Jasmine. "This is reverse discrimination. She was breaking the rules, and now her husband swoops in to punish me for doing my job." Jasmine, who had remained composed throughout the confrontation, finally spoke. "No, Ms. Blackwell. This is accountability. The rules were on my side. The law was on my side. All that was missing was someone with enough power to enforce them. Not everyone has that advantage." As Karen was escorted from the room, still protesting her innocence, Travis turned to Robert Keller. "Mr. Keller, your decision to place the victim of assault on a no-fly list rather than investigating properly reflects either incompetence or bias. Neither is acceptable in my company. Your resignation will be accepted by end of business today." Keller nodded miserably, knowing further protest was futile. Captain Phillips began, "Mr. Williams, regarding my position. You'll be suspended pending review," Travis informed him. "Your failure to properly assess the situation before authorizing removal of a passenger merits serious examination." With the individual consequences addressed, Travis shifted focus to the broader implications. This incident, while personally painful, has revealed systemic issues within SkyWest's culture. Beginning tomorrow, we're implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff. Our breastfeeding policy will be prominently displayed at gates and in onboard materials. And we're establishing an independent review board for passenger complaints involving potential discrimination. As Travis outlined these immediate changes, Jasmine watched the executives' reactions. Some nodded in agreement, while others seemed resistant to the implied criticism of their leadership. She recognized that firing Karen was the easy part, transforming the corporate culture would be the real challenge. When the meeting concluded, Travis and Jasmine walked out together, both aware that while this confrontation had provided some measure of justice, it was merely the beginning of a much larger battle, one that would soon explode beyond their control. By sunset, the story had metastasized from a viral social media moment to a full-blown national news sensation. Every major network featured the footage of Karen slapping Jasmine, followed by analysis from legal experts, breastfeeding advocates, and civil rights leaders. The original Twitter video had surpassed 20 million views, while the hashtags #JusticeForJasmine and #BoycottSkyWest trended worldwide. In the executive suite of Atlanta's Grand Hyatt Hotel, where Travis had secured rooms for his family, Jasmine sat cross-legged on the king-sized bed, scrolling through the avalanche of notifications on her phone. Zora slept peacefully in a portable crib nearby, blissfully unaware of her role in what was becoming a cultural flashpoint. "They want me on Good Morning America tomorrow," Jasmine said, looking up as Travis emerged from the bathroom. "CNN and MSNBC too." Travis loosened his tie, exhaustion evident in the lines around his eyes. "What do you want to do?" Jasmine set her phone aside, considering the question carefully. "Part of me wants to hide until this blows over. But I keep thinking about all the women who faced similar discrimination without having a husband who owns the airline." Travis sat beside her, taking her hand. "This could be a platform. A chance to address something bigger than what happened to us today." "Exactly," Jasmine nodded. Not just about breastfeeding rights, but about how quickly people in authority believe the worst about black women. How we're criminalized for normal behavior. How our pain and humiliation are dismissed. They stayed up late into the night, discussing how to approach the media opportunities thoughtfully. By the time they fell asleep, they had agreed to use their unexpected spotlight to advocate for systemic change rather than focusing solely on Karen's individual actions or their personal vindication. Morning brought a fresh wave of developments. A SkyWest employee leaked Karen's personnel file to the press, revealing that the 7 previous discrimination complaints Travis had mentioned were merely the ones that had been formally documented. The airline had repeatedly protected her despite a clear pattern of problematic behavior. Competing airlines wasted no time capitalizing on SkyWest's troubles. Delta issued a statement reaffirming its support for breastfeeding mothers and highlighting its diversity training programs. American Airlines announced a new initiative to provide private nursing spaces in all its airport lounges. At SkyWest headquarters, the old guard of executives scrambled to control the damage. The airline's PR team crafted a carefully worded statement expressing regret for the unfortunate incident, without actually admitting wrongdoing or addressing the racial component. Travis, receiving this draft via email while Jasmine prepared for her GMA interview, immediately rejected it. Absolutely not, he told his chief of staff over the phone. They're still not getting it. Call an emergency board meeting for noon. Jasmine's television appearances proved more impactful than either of them had anticipated. Poised and articulate, she shared her experience not with tearful victimhood but with the clinical precision of her medical training, explaining exactly how the airline's actions had endangered both her and her infant's well-being. When I was prevented from feeding my hungry baby after hours of delay, that was a health risk, she explained to the GMA host. When I was removed from the plane and detained without access to sanitary facilities to change my daughter's diaper, that was a health risk. These aren't just conveniences or preferences, they're public health issues. When asked about Karen's termination, Jasmine was equally measured. This isn't about one flight attendant losing her job. It's about examining the systems that repeatedly protected her despite multiple discrimination complaints. It's about asking why security officers automatically believed her version of events despite video evidence to the contrary. By mid-morning, public sentiment had solidified strongly in Jasmine's favor. Medical associations issued statements supporting breastfeeding rights. Civil rights organizations called for investigations into SkyWest's handling of previous discrimination complaints. Mothers groups organized nurse-ins at SkyWest ticket counters nationwide. The noon board meeting Travis had called began with tension thick enough to cut. Several long-serving board members clearly resented his sudden acquisition and the changes he was implementing without their input. Others seemed genuinely concerned about the company's rapidly deteriorating public image and financial position. Our stock has dropped 12% since yesterday, the CFO reported grimly. Advance bookings are down 30%. Travel agencies are reporting customers specifically requesting to avoid SkyWest routes. And this surprises you? Travis responded, his patience wearing thin. We assaulted a breastfeeding mother, doubled down by removing her from the plane, then tried to deflect with a non-apology. The public isn't stupid. With all due respect, Mr. Williams, interrupted Harold Fitzgerald, a board member who had been with SkyWest for over 2 decades, this incident has been blown out of proportion. We've always handled customer service matters internally, without this kind of disruption. That's precisely the problem, Travis countered. Handling discrimination, internally, has meant burying complaints and protecting employees like Karen Blackwell regardless of their behavior. As the meeting continued, Travis's phone buzzed with an urgent message from his chief of staff, Karen Blackwell on CNN right now, unauthorized interview. Travis gestured for an aide to turn on the conference room's television. There on screen was Karen, composed and playing the role of a grieved employee perfectly. I was simply following what I understood to be company policy, she told the interviewer, her voice quavering slightly. Now I've been publicly humiliated and fired without due process because this passenger happened to be married to a powerful man. "Did you slap Dr. Williams?" the interviewer asked directly. "There was contact," Karen admitted reluctantly. But it was a reflexive response to her aggressive behavior. "I felt threatened." The room erupted as board members reacted to this blatant misrepresentation of events that millions had witnessed on video. "She's making it worse," exclaimed the head of marketing. "Our legal position was already precarious," added the general counsel. "This could expose us to significant liability." Travis raised a hand, silencing the room. "This ends today." Not just Karen Blackwell, but the culture that created her. "I'm announcing a complete overhaul of SkyWest's leadership and policies, effective immediately." "You can't just replace the entire executive team," Fitzgerald protested. "There are procedures, contracts." "Watch me," Travis replied coolly. "As majority shareholder, I have broad authority to protect my investment. This airline is in crisis, and incremental changes won't cut it." Meanwhile, Jasmine was experiencing another side of their sudden notoriety. Her phone filled with messages from other mothers, particularly women of color, sharing similar experiences of discrimination while breastfeeding. Some had been asked to leave restaurants or cover up in shopping malls. Others had been reported to security in parks or libraries. Many had faced workplace harassment for pumping breast milk. "It's not just about airlines," Jasmine told Travis when they reconnected that afternoon. "This is happening everywhere, to women who don't have our resources or platform." Travis nodded thoughtfully. "Then we need to think bigger than just fixing SkyWest." That evening, they made a joint decision that would transform a personal humiliation into a movement for change. Using Travis's business acumen and Jasmine's medical expertise, they would establish a foundation dedicated to protecting the rights of breastfeeding mothers, with special focus on addressing the disparities faced by women of color. As they finalized these plans, neither realized that their marriage was about to face its own turbulence. The media spotlight that had initially unified them in purpose would soon expose cracks in their relationship as the personal and professional boundaries blurred in ways neither had anticipated. 3 weeks after the incident, Jasmine bolted upright in bed at 3:17 a.m., her heart racing and her nightgown damp with sweat. In her nightmare, she was back on that plane, but this time hundreds of hands reached for Zora, trying to pull her baby away while faceless flight attendants held Jasmine down. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Travis, who had finally fallen asleep after another late-night emergency board call. In the adjoining room, Jasmine checked on Zora, watching the gentle rise and fall of her daughter's chest. The baby had been having feeding difficulties since the incident, sometimes turning away from the breast entirely, as if associating feeding time with trauma. "It's okay, baby girl," Jasmine whispered, gently stroking Zora's cheek. "We're safe." But were they? The past weeks had brought a level of scrutiny neither Jasmine nor Travis had anticipated. What began as public support had morphed into something more complex as their story became a proxy battle in America's culture wars. Travis had thrown himself completely into restructuring SkyWest, working 18-hour days to overhaul policies and leadership. He'd installed a diverse executive team and implemented what industry analysts were calling the most progressive family-friendly policies in aviation. The stock had stabilized after the initial plunge, but remained volatile as the market assessed whether his reforms would translate to profitability. Meanwhile, Jasmine had taken a leave of absence from her medical practice after patients' families began requesting different doctors. Some expressed concern that her celebrity status would distract from their children's care. Others, more honest in their prejudice, simply didn't want the troublemaker doctor. Her department chair had been supportive but concerned about the disruption to the practice. More disturbingly, both Jasmine and Travis had received death threats. Their home address had been leaked online, forcing them to temporarily relocate to a secure apartment building with private security. Every time Jasmine took Zora out, she felt exposed, wondering if the person giving her a second glance was simply recognizing her from the news or harboring more sinister intentions. As Jasmine returned to bed, she found Travis awake, scrolling through emails on his phone. "Another nightmare?" he asked, setting the device aside. Jasmine nodded, settling beside him. Same one. They're trying to take Zora. Travis pulled her close. No one's going to take our daughter. You can't promise that, Jasmine replied, giving voice to her deepest fear. Look what happened to that family in Missouri last month. Child Services called because someone reported them for neglect after seeing their story online. They were innocent, but still had to fight to keep their kids. That won't happen to us, Travis insisted, but Jasmine caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The truth was, their lives had become unrecognizable. What should have been a precious time with their new baby had transformed into a public battle neither had sought. Travis was rarely home, and when he was, he seemed preoccupied with Sky West's transformation. Jasmine found herself increasingly alone with her anxiety and Zora's developing issues. Later that morning, as Travis prepared to leave for another full day at Sky West headquarters, Jasmine finally voiced what had been building between them. We need to talk about what this is doing to us, she said, blocking his path to the door. To our family. Travis checked his watch. I have the executive committee in 30 minutes. That's exactly what I mean, Jasmine interrupted. You're so focused on fixing the airline that you're not seeing what's happening at home. Zora barely sees you. I'm having panic attacks. This isn't sustainable. Travis sighed heavily, setting down his briefcase. What choice do I have, Jazz? I bought this airline as a business opportunity, not knowing it would become ground zero for a national conversation on race and motherhood. If I step back now, the old guard will reassert control and nothing will change. So our family pays the price? Jasmine challenged. Before Travis could respond, his phone rang, the ringtone he'd assigned to urgent board matters. The tension between them thickened as he answered, immediately absorbed in yet another crisis. Meanwhile, across town, Karen Blackwell was experiencing her own set of consequences. After her unauthorized CNN appearance backfired spectacularly, with social media users creating side-by-side comparisons of her claims versus the video evidence, she had become a reluctant icon for anti-breastfeeding groups and covert racist organizations who framed her as a victim of woke culture. Karen had hired an aggressive attorney and filed a wrongful termination lawsuit against Sky West, claiming discrimination based on age and gender. Though legal experts gave her case little chance of success given the video evidence, conservative media outlets provided her a platform to share her distorted version of events. I was enforcing standards of public decency, she told a sympathetic host on a cable news program. Now I'm unemployable because I dared to uphold traditional values. These appearances earned Karen modest speaking fees and temporary notoriety, but behind the scenes, her life was unraveling. Former colleagues distanced themselves. Her reputation in the aviation industry was irreparably damaged. She received hate mail alongside messages of support, leaving her isolated and increasingly bitter. As Karen's public campaign against the Williams family intensified, Travis discovered a new threat within Sky West itself. A faction of board members, led by Harold Fitzgerald, was quietly organizing to challenge his control of the company. They had been approaching other shareholders, arguing that Travis's radical agenda was jeopardizing the airline's financial stability. They're planning to call a special meeting next week, Travis's loyal chief of staff informed him. They think they can muster enough proxy votes to remove you as CEO and restructure the board. Travis's jaw tightened. On what grounds? They're claiming your personal connection to the incident has clouded your judgment. That your changes are reactionary and financially unsound. This revelation explained why certain board members had been stonewalling his initiatives and slow-walking the diversity reforms. While publicly supporting the changes, they had been secretly undermining him, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That evening, Travis returned home earlier than usual, finding Jasmine in the nursery, attempting to soothe a fussy Zora who once again was refusing to nurse. The pediatrician thinks it might be trauma-associated feeding aversion, Jasmine explained, frustration and worry etched on her face. She's recommended a specialist. Travis took Zora gently, cradling her against his chest where she eventually calmed. "I'm sorry I haven't been here," he said quietly. "You were right this morning." Jasmine softened at his admission. "What's going on? You don't come home at 6 without a reason." Travis explained the board's plot to remove him, watching Jasmine's expression shift from concern to indignation. "After everything that happened, they still don't get it," she said incredulously. "It's always been about money for them," Travis replied. "They were willing to tolerate my diversity initiatives as long as they didn't threaten the status quo too much. Now they're painting me as the emotional husband making irrational decisions." Jasmine shook her head, anger rising. "So all of this, what happened to me, to us, it meant nothing to them. It was a PR problem to manage, nothing more," Travis confirmed. "And now they think the PR value has been extracted, so it's time to return to business as usual." As they discussed strategies for countering the board's move, Travis's phone lit up with a news alert. One of his strongest allies on the board had unexpectedly resigned, citing personal reasons. The timing was suspicious, suggesting pressure or perhaps blackmail. "They're picking us off one by one," Travis muttered, scrolling through the developing coverage. The walls were closing in from all sides. Karen's public campaign was gaining traction in certain circles. The board was mobilizing against Travis. Jasmine's career hung in limbo. And at the center of it all, baby Zora was showing signs of the trauma that had rippled through her young life. That night, as they lay in bed reviewing the latest social media firestorm, Jasmine turned to Travis with resolve in her eyes. "We can't keep playing defense," she said firmly. "It's time we take control of this narrative once and for all." "What are you thinking?" Travis asked, recognizing the determination that had first drawn him to her years ago. "I'm thinking we stop trying to manage this crisis and start using it to create real change," Jasmine replied. "Not just at Sky West, but everywhere mothers face discrimination. We've been reacting. Now it's time to lead." As they began formulating a bold new approach, neither realized that an unexpected ally was about to emerge, someone with explosive information that would shift the balance of power just as the situation reached its breaking point. Jasmine's phone rang at 2:13 a.m., jolting her from a rare moment of untroubled sleep. The hospital's number flashed on her screen, unusual since she was still officially on leave. "Dr. Williams," she answered, instantly alert. "Jasmine, it's Darnell." The voice of her colleague, Dr. Darnell Washington, was strained. "I'm so sorry to call you like this, but I thought you should know before you hear it elsewhere. It's about Malik Thompson." Jasmine sat upright, fully awake now. Malik was a 7-year-old patient she had been treating for asthma since he was a toddler. What happened? "He came in yesterday with respiratory distress. His mother kept insisting something was seriously wrong beyond his asthma, but..." Darnell's voice cracked. The attending dismissed her concerns as overreaction. By the time they ordered the proper tests, he was in septic shock from pneumonia. "We lost him an hour ago." The news hit Jasmine like a physical blow. Malik, with his gap-toothed smile and passion for dinosaurs, gone because his black mother's concerns had been dismissed, just as Jasmine's had been on that flight. "His mother asked for you specifically," Darnell continued. "She said you were the only doctor who ever really listened." After the call ended, Jasmine sat in the darkness, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't coincidence, it was pattern. The same systemic bias that had led to Karen Blackwell slapping her had just claimed a child's life. When Travis found her still sitting there at dawn, the grief in her eyes told him something fundamental had shifted. "I can't do this anymore," Jasmine said, her voice steady despite her red-rimmed eyes. "I can't keep fighting isolated battles while children like Malik die because their mothers aren't believed." She explained what had happened, watching understanding dawn on Travis's face. "This was never just about breastfeeding on a plane," she concluded. "It's about who gets respected, who gets believed, who gets protected. And right now, we're letting the wrong people control that conversation." Travis sat beside her, taking her hand. "What do you want to do?" "I want to testify at the shareholder meeting tomorrow," Jasmine replied. "Not as your wife, but as a physician who's seen firsthand how these biases kill people." Travis nodded slowly. "The board won't like it." "I don't care what the board likes," Jasmine responded, a new resolve hardening her voice. "This is bigger than SkyWest now." As they began preparing for the shareholder meeting, an unexpected email arrived from Amara Johnson, a flight attendant who had worked alongside Karen Blackwell for 7 years. The subject line read simply, "Evidence you need to see." The attached files contained dozens of internal complaints against Karen that had never been formally processed. Incidents where she had targeted passengers of color, particularly women, for heightened scrutiny and mistreatment. More damning were the email exchanges showing how management had systematically buried these complaints to protect Karen and avoid potential discrimination lawsuits. "This could change everything," Travis said as they reviewed the documents. "With this evidence, we can prove the incident with you wasn't isolated but part of a pattern the company knowingly ignored." Jasmine narrowed her eyes, scanning the emails. Who else received these complaints? Who was complicit? The answer became clear as they cross-referenced names. Harold Fitzgerald, the board member leading the charge against Travis, had personally intervened in at least 5 cases to protect Karen and other employees with similar histories of discriminatory behavior. Meanwhile, across town, Karen Blackwell was preparing for a television appearance that she believed would rehabilitate her image. Her attorney had negotiated a primetime interview where she planned to portray herself as a scapegoat in a corporate power struggle. She had rehearsed her talking points carefully, focusing on her years of unblemished service and portraying Jasmine as the aggressor. What Karen didn't know was that the network had received copies of the same internal documents now in Travis and Jasmine's possession. The producers had made the strategic decision not to inform Karen of this development before putting her on air. As the shareholder meeting approached, Travis faced another crisis. The board faction led by Fitzgerald had secured commitments from enough shareholders to potentially win the vote to remove him. His position as CEO, despite being the majority owner, was genuinely at risk. "We're down to our last play," Travis told his loyal executives during a strategy session. "If we can't convince the institutional investors to back us tomorrow, everything we've worked for gets rolled back." The morning of the shareholder meeting dawned with tension thick in the air. Financial news networks speculated about Travis's imminent ousting. Karen Blackwell prepared for her interview, confident in her narrative. And Jasmine, with Zora in her mother's care for the day, steeled herself to speak her truth to power. The grand ballroom of Atlanta's Peachtree Hotel filled with shareholders, executives, and media. Travis, impeccable in a charcoal suit, took his position at the podium with the quiet confidence that had built his business empire. If he was worried about the coming vote, his demeanor didn't show it. "Good morning," he began. "Before we address the agenda items, including the motion regarding leadership changes, I've invited someone to speak whose perspective is essential to understanding the issues before us today." Harold Fitzgerald immediately rose from his seat. "Point of order. This meeting has a specified agenda that doesn't include guest speakers." As CEO and chair, Travis countered smoothly, "I have the authority to invite relevant expert testimony. Dr. Williams is both a medical professional and the victim in the incident that precipitated our current situation." Before Fitzgerald could object further, Jasmine walked confidently to the podium. Unlike previous public appearances where she had been measured and cautious, today she radiated righteous purpose. "My name is Dr. Jasmine Williams," she began, her voice clear and strong. 3 weeks ago, I was assaulted by a SkyWest employee for legally breastfeeding my baby. But I'm not here to talk about that incident. I'm here because yesterday, a 7-year-old patient of mine named Malik Thompson died unnecessarily because medical staff didn't believe his mother's concerns about his symptoms. A murmur ran through the audience as Jasmine continued, connecting the dots between what happened to her on the plane and what happened to Malik in the hospital. "These aren't isolated incidents," she explained. "They're symptoms of the same disease, a system that devalues black women's voices, that treats our concerns as hysteria, our needs as inconveniences, and our children as less worthy of protection. As Jasmine spoke, Travis's chief of staff discreetly moved through the room, distributing flash drives containing Amara Johnson's evidence to key shareholders and media representatives. Some will tell you this is about one disgruntled employee or one overreaching executive, Jasmine continued. They're wrong. This is about whether corporations like SkyWest will perpetuate systems of discrimination or help dismantle them. Jasmine then addressed the financial concerns directly. As shareholders, you're being asked to choose between short-term stability and long-term transformation. Between comfortable familiarity and necessary evolution. The question isn't whether SkyWest can afford to change. It's whether SkyWest can afford not to. As Jasmine concluded her powerful testimony, Travis returned to the podium and addressed the elephant in the room. I understand that concerns have been raised about my objectivity in handling this situation. That's fair. But before you vote, you should have all the facts. He directed attention to the distributed evidence, explaining how it demonstrated years of systemic discrimination that predated his ownership. The leadership team that's asking for your vote today isn't just resistant to change, they actively covered up the very problems we're now trying to fix. The room erupted as shareholders began reviewing the damning emails. Harold Fitzgerald's face drained of color as he recognized his own correspondence projected onto the main screen, explicit instructions to bury complaints against Karen and other employees to avoid creating a paper trail. At that precise moment across town, Karen Blackwell walked into an ambush of her own making on national television. The interviewer, armed with the same evidence, systematically dismantled Karen's narrative of victimhood, confronting her with her own documented history of targeting minority passengers. These are fabrications, Karen sputtered when shown the internal complaints. I've never discriminated against anyone. The interviewer then played a devastating compilation of security footage from multiple flights showing Karen's pattern of behavior. Her attempts to defend herself only dug a deeper hole as millions watched her facade crumble in real time. Back at the shareholder meeting, the tide had turned dramatically. Investors who had planned to vote against Travis were now questioning the credibility of Fitzgerald and his faction. When the final votes were tallied, Travis retained his position by a narrow margin, not a resounding victory, but enough to continue the reforms he'd begun. As Travis and Jasmine left the meeting, exhausted but vindicated, they knew this was just one battle in a much longer war. The systems they were challenging had deep roots and powerful defenders. But for the first time since the incident on the plane, they felt united in purpose rather than divided by its consequences. That evening, as Jasmine successfully nursed Zora for the first time in weeks, she and Travis began planning their next steps, not just for SkyWest, but for the broader changes they now felt called to champion. The breaking point had come, but instead of shattering them, it had forged a new determination to transform pain into progress. 6 months later, Jasmine stood at the podium in SkyWest's newly renovated headquarters, looking out at the diverse faces of the company's transformed executive team. Behind her, a large banner proclaimed the airline's new slogan, "Everyone belongs in the sky." Today marks not just a corporate milestone, she began, but a testament to what's possible when painful moments become catalysts for meaningful change. The audience included employees, media representatives, and advocates from various organizations dedicated to equity in transportation and healthcare. In the front row sat Travis, holding Zora, now a healthy, thriving 9-month-old who had fully recovered from her early feeding difficulties. The transformation of SkyWest over the past half-year had been remarkable by any standard. Under Travis's leadership, the airline had implemented the industry's most comprehensive anti-discrimination policies, created a passenger bill of rights specifically addressing the needs of parents and caregivers, and established nursing stations in every SkyWest terminal. More significantly, Travis had fundamentally restructured the company's leadership, bringing in qualified executives from underrepresented groups at every level. The board that had once tried to oust him now featured a majority of women and people of color who shared his vision for an airline that truly reflected the diversity of its passengers. When I was assaulted for feeding my baby, Jasmine continued, I could never have imagined that moment would lead to the creation of the Dignity in Flight Foundation. The foundation, jointly established by Jasmine and Travis, had already provided legal support to dozens of passengers who had experienced discrimination on various airlines. It had also funded research into how transportation policies disproportionately affected women of color and their children. Karen Blackwell's story had taken a different turn. Her lawsuit against SkyWest had collapsed spectacularly when more victims came forward with their own footage and testimony. The final blow came when her own racist text messages to colleagues were submitted as evidence, revealing the true nature of her standards and traditional values. Denied the victimhood narrative she had tried to craft, Karen briefly became a minor celebrity in certain fringe circles before fading into obscurity. Her last public appearance had been 6 weeks earlier, announcing her retirement from public life after a particularly disastrous podcast interview where she had been unable to explain away her documented pattern of targeting minority passengers. Robert Keller, the customer service director who had placed Jasmine on the no-fly list, had experienced a different kind of reckoning. After losing his position at SkyWest, he had undergone a period of genuine reflection, eventually reaching out to Jasmine with a sincere apology. Now, he volunteered with the foundation, using his insider knowledge to help identify and address systemic biases in airline policies. The easiest response to discrimination is retaliation, Jasmine told the attentive audience. The harder but more transformative response is reformation. At the Dignity in Flight Foundation, we believe in the power of changed systems, not just changed individuals. This philosophy had guided their approach to the most difficult decision they'd faced, how to respond to the hospital where Malik Thompson had died. Rather than pursuing a purely punitive approach, Jasmine had worked with Malik's mother to establish new protocols for pediatric assessment that specifically addressed implicit bias in symptom evaluation. The Malik protocol was now being adopted by hospitals nationwide. As Jasmine concluded her speech, she invited Travis and Zora to join her on stage. To the surprise and delight of the audience, she casually adjusted her blazer and began nursing Zora right there at the podium, a powerful symbol of how far they had come from that fateful day on Flight 237. "This is what progress looks like," she said over the applause. "Not just policies on paper, but lived experiences transformed. Not just diversity in hiring, but dignity in practice." The annual Fly with Dignity Day that commemorated the incident had become a touchstone for the airline industry, with even SkyWest's competitors adopting similar initiatives. What had begun as a humiliating moment for one mother had catalyzed a movement that was reshaping corporate America's approach to inclusion. After the ceremony, Jasmine and Travis hosted a more intimate gathering for those who had been instrumental in their journey. Amara Johnson, the flight attendant whose evidence had turned the tide at the shareholder meeting, was now SkyWest's director of crew training, implementing protocols that emphasized cultural competence alongside safety procedures. Darnell Washington, Jasmine's colleague who had called her that fateful night about Malik, had joined the board of the healthcare arm of their foundation. Together, they were addressing the disparities that led to higher maternal and infant mortality rates in communities of color. Even some former antagonists found pathways to redemption. Captain James Phillips, after his suspension and mandatory training, had become an unexpected ally, using his seniority to mentor younger pilots from diverse backgrounds. He had personally apologized to Jasmine, acknowledging how his uncritical acceptance of Karen's version of events had contributed to her humiliation. As the evening wound down, Travis and Jasmine found a quiet moment alone, watching Zora charm a group of adoring executives nearby. "Did you ever imagine this is where we'd end up when you got that text about me buying the airline?" Travis asked, slipping his arm around her waist. Jasmine laughed softly. "Not in my wildest dreams. I was just hoping to get to Los Angeles without being assaulted." Her tone grew more serious. "But looking back, as painful as it was, I wouldn't change what happened. Not when I see all the mothers who can now feed their babies without fear. Not when I think about the children like Malik whose parents are finally being heard." Travis nodded thoughtfully. "Systems don't change without pressure. Sometimes it takes a breaking point." The next morning, Jasmine boarded a SkyWest flight with Zora, now part of her regular schedule as she divided time between clinical practice and foundation work. The difference in their experience was profound. The diverse flight crew greeted them with genuine warmth. A discreet sign near the boarding door outlined passengers' rights, including the explicit protection of breastfeeding mothers. When Zora grew hungry mid-flight, Jasmine nursed her without hesitation or cover, receiving only smiles of support from nearby passengers. The flight attendant who passed by quietly offered her a glass of water, a small gesture that represented a complete reversal from her previous experience. As the plane began its descent, Jasmine looked down at her sleeping daughter and thought about the world they were helping to create. One where Zora would hopefully never experience the discrimination her mother had faced, where her voice would be valued and her needs respected. The transformation wasn't complete, of course. True change never happened overnight or without resistance. There would always be more barriers to break, more minds to change, more systems to reform. But looking around at the tangible differences already evident, Jasmine felt something she hadn't experienced since before that fateful flight: hope. Not just hope for her daughter's future, but hope for all the children who would grow up in a world where their mother's dignity was protected, where their care was prioritized, and where belonging wasn't determined by the color of their skin or the circumstances of their birth. The plane touched down smoothly, a perfect landing to conclude their journey. As they taxied toward the terminal, Jasmine whispered to the still sleeping Zora, "This is just the beginning, baby girl. Just the beginning." This powerful story reminds us that discrimination often thrives in environments where it goes unchallenged. When Jasmine was assaulted for breastfeeding, it wasn't just one flight attendant's prejudice but an entire system that validated her actions by removing the victim instead of the perpetrator. True change requires addressing both individual actions and the systems that protect them. The transformation at SkyWest demonstrates how accountability can lead to genuine progress. Though it took someone with power to force immediate consequences, lasting change came through policy reforms, diverse leadership, and cultural shifts throughout the organization. Jasmine and Travis show us the importance of using privilege and platform responsibly. Rather than seeking personal vengeance, they created structures to help others without their advantages. Their foundation ensured that their individual victory became a pathway for broader social change. Perhaps most importantly, this story highlights the real human cost of discrimination. From Zora's feeding difficulties to Malik's tragic death, bias creates consequences that extend far beyond momentary discomfort. By connecting these dots, we understand why addressing discrimination isn't just moral, it's literally life-saving. What would you do if you witnessed discrimination like what Jasmine experienced? Would you speak up or stay quiet? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful racism stories and tales of overcoming injustice. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear that standing up for what's right can truly change the world. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember, your voice matters, and together we can create a more compassionate society for everyone.